I'm really glad to kind of be back at TOA, but this time as someone speaking with one of the pioneers of zero knowledge technology. It's a subject that's kind of close to both of our hearts, but I thought it would probably just be helpful to kind of get a show of hands from like the broader audience around like who's heard about like blockchains and Ethereum to start with. Good. Who's heard about layer 2 solutions and scalability issues? Right, amazing. Who has lastly heard about zero knowledge as a means for addressing these problems? Righty, that's helpful to know. So I guess we'll try our best to make this such that you get a taste of what zero knowledge is really. And Alex has been someone who's been working in the space for a very, very long time. So I think he can guide people along his journey and get maybe some people inspired to think about what this paradigm really is. So starting out, I think Alex and I had the opportunity to meet in maybe like 2019 or 2020 at Full Node in Berlin, where he was speaking a little about his journey to the space and how he kind of got to work on what he's working. So I'd love to start with addressing that. So would be good for you to kind of speak about how you kind of made your way to the space and what is it that inspires you to kind of keep working on these things.
Sure. So I want to start with saying that the project we're building, so Meta Labs is the company behind zkSync. zkSync is the name of the project and the protocol we're doing. And it's a deeply mission-driven project. We have a very clearly articulated mission, and every decision we do is measured against this mission. And the mission is to increase freedom. And this really starts with my deep desire to have freedom for myself and share it with people I love and with everyone who wants to get more freedom. And it goes with its roots into my childhood, my early life. I was born in Soviet Ukraine, just before the collapse of Soviet Union. It was probably the worst time in the history of the country, where the old institutions were completely broken and did not function anymore, and the new institutions have not yet been established, and the society was in the middle of this collapse. You can imagine nothing works. So my father used to work in the police. He would not get salary for a year. You can imagine like what it meant. Like the crime was rampant. There was a suspended feeling of anxiety with everyone, because you would not know, like, would you get a job tomorrow? Would you be able to feed your family? And you had a lot of limitations. Like I was coming from a very from an average family, which meant we were very poor. We could not afford a lot of stuff. We would get oranges once a year for a New Year celebration. We would not be able to go abroad because you needed a visa, you needed the passports, and you would not be considered like first-class citizens. And things like this naturally lead to a lot of to motivation to do something, to change, to use your energy to get out of these conditions. And it was only later that I realized what was the root cause of the problem there. When I went to Germany, right after I finished my bachelor's degree, I started working in software industry. And I started working with people who are also coming from Ukraine, from Eastern Europe, from other places. And all of a sudden, the same people that would produce very little in Ukraine back then, or would not make a lot of money and would not make a lot of impact, all of a sudden they would make a lot of money and a lot of impact in the places where they work. And I asked myself, what's the difference? Why is the same? You can't explain it by culture means, saying oh, this nation is you don't have enough average IQ, or culture is not properly emphasizing work or whatever. No, exactly same people would do much better in a different environment. And there was a really interesting TED talk, which I only saw years later, from Paul Romer, who was speaking about charter cities. He brought an even better example of a guy in Africa who was he brought a picture of a guy sitting under a lantern reading a book, and he said he's sitting there because he doesn't have electricity at home, but I can assure you he has a cell phone in his pocket. How can it be that someone can have access to technology which is 5 years old and not have access to technology which is 100 years old. It cannot be explained by natural reasons. The more I learned later, the more I realized that the root cause of the problem was lack of freedom. Like, there are artificial limitations that people put, like they just get together through natural coincidence of like groups of interest, try to absorb and consolidate and keep power, and they introduce certain rules that benefit the in-group at the expense of the out-group. And this happens naturally. Like, think of the banking system today. Like, they spend like 80% of the entire budget of the banks on compliance, which they could complain about, but they don't, because it makes it virtually impossible for anyone new to enter the market and start innovating in the banking. Like, it's very, very hard. Like, you could do it maybe 10 years ago. Today, it's prohibitively expensive and hard and difficult, and you need connections and all of that. So the freedom is all about lowering the barrier of entry, making it possible to enter, disrupt a space and innovate. And innovation means experimenting, and then the market will decide. And like, it's an evolutionary process where the best ideas, the best people, the best technologies will eventually prevail. So the blockchain, the idea of blockchain in general, for me, is all about preserving and enhancing this freedom. It started with Bitcoin. I learned about Bitcoin like shortly after it was invented. I thought like, oh, maybe it's it's a really interesting idea, but it's probably going to remain a toy and never really will really get off. And then I relearned about it a couple of years later when the price was going already parabolic, and I was like, oh, shit, I have to jump on it and just do something with Bitcoin, because it resonates with two passions of mine: this desire and drive for freedom, and the technological complexity that like solving interesting problems in tech. And I realized that Bitcoin was not ready. Back then I was in Berlin. I was working. I was a co-founder of Paul Camper, the startup that was doing camper sharing. It's still the largest in Europe, I guess. And I tried to integrate Bitcoin into the application, and it didn't make sense for me, because like, I have my list of priorities. I cannot put something up on this list, even if it's a minor investment, if it doesn't bring immediate return on investment. And it didn't seem to bring it. Like, you can use Bitcoin for protecting yourself against inflation, which is a terrible problem. If you look how the world was evolving since 1971, when the inflation got completely out of control because they depegged from gold standard ultimately and forever. Bitcoin seemed like a really good hedge, but it was not something that can penetrate the general. It could not serve as basically the extension of the internet for value. And then Ethereum appeared, and with Ethereum it was clear that the programmability, the extent to which you can flexibly program, encode things, is much higher. And you can do, you can solve the problem of volatility of cryptocurrencies. You can introduce something like stable coins. So you can have the virtual token, which is completely decentralized, not controlled by anyone. You are the sovereign owner of these assets, but they still remain pegged one-to-one to US dollars or euro or whatever. So this seemed like the innovation wave that was basically bridging the way to mass adoption of this. What Web3 is standing for, the third generation of the internet, the extension of it. So I jumped on, I looked into Ethereum, what problems needed to be solved to get to mass adoption, and scalability was to me, the biggest one, because it required a technological solution. And then I learned about zero knowledge proofs, and I got fascinated with this tech.
That's very, very glad. I mean, in some sense, kind of resonates a little with my story in some sense. I've also pretty much had similar upbringing, a similar past, but I guess that the notion of personal freedom to me kind of came actually from a game more so than my surroundings. But it's definitely nice to kind of hear that we now have a mechanism for people to kind of express their intent and own things that they value, and use that to kind of create essentially borderless ways of collaborating with each other. So I guess with that in mind, I'm also curious about one of the last points that you touched upon, which is relating to scalability. I think you also kind of released like a ZK Credo in one sense, which kind of highlights this as one of the I guess the crucial factors underpinning decentralized systems as such. But I'm curious about what you feel has been the fundamental issue with scalability around blockchains, and how do you kind of see zero knowledge really being a way to address this particular problem?
So scalability is not a new problem. It's been known since basically the beginning of blockchains, Bitcoin, and there were a lot of attempts to solve it with the means that were available back then. And it was very tempting to give up certain properties of this network that I believe are like the really inherently making the core value proposition of blockchains. So it's easy to scale blockchain if you just put it on Postgres and say like we're going to be doing million transactions per second. But you're going to lose something very important in that. And it was intuitively clear to me and to people I was working with like what those values are. And we just decided recently to articulate them very precisely for our community. We've been using them as a North Star for the zkSync as a project for like the way we develop it, but we wanted to put it in writing and share with community and get feedback to kind of like solidify it. And this manifesto is the ZK Credo.
I guess it's really interesting that you choose to put forth like a manifesto in some sense around zero knowledge specifically. So I've always generally been inspired by like the Cypherpunk manifesto, which inspired me to move here from the US. But why does zero knowledge require like a manifesto in this particular case? What is it that you want the community to kind of think about, emote on, and ultimately develop an ethos around when you generally think about like zero knowledge as such?
So I would say zero knowledge proofs themselves do not require a manifesto. They are fine by their own. And maybe like since not a lot of people know what zero knowledge proofs are, maybe I can give it a try to explain. It's a very beautiful cryptographic protocol that allows you to prove the integrity of very large computation, which can be succinctly verified. So you can imagine like you do like a lot of data processing. You get a very short proof, like 1 kilobyte of data, and then you can perform very simple mathematical operations that will like run on your cell phone 30 milliseconds, and you can immediately check if the result of this computation is valid or not, without redoing all these heavy computations that will take like many GPUs, like thousands of GPUs to process the data there. And as a part of it, you don't have to disclose all the inputs to your program. So you can omit some of the inputs, keep them, like this is where the name zero knowledge is coming from. You don't have to disclose anything about the computation apart from, like, we have to both agree on what is the function that we're computing. So I know the function, but I don't know your inputs. So using this property, we can achieve privacy and we can achieve scalability because the computation can be much larger. And it's really fascinating to see mathematical functions that, mathematical things that are beautiful and find immediate direct application in the real world. You can think of fractals and their applications in like antenna technologies, where like they give you completely different properties from with resonating with the physical world. Or you can think of Fourier transform to get process signals and do really interesting things. Like zero knowledge proofs is one class of these mathematical functions. Very beautiful, and it almost feels magical.
Great. So in some sense, it's basically like I can compute like I can maybe basically do like 1 million operations on my computer, but then I essentially compute a proof that I've done this correctly, and I send it across to really anyone, and that's a way they verify that I've done this correctly.
Exactly. You can think like in the longer future, we'll see things like zkML, for example, where you will be able to ask a machine learning algorithm something, a GPT model, some question, get a result, and be sure that this result has been produced by a specific model, that it has not been tampered with, even if the model has been generated on a completely untrusted hardware. In fact, like, you can assume that the data center where the model, like where the program is running, is owned and controlled by a villain, and they still cannot do anything wrong because they provide you the output, and then they provide you the zero knowledge proof, and you can verify it trusting only math and not any humans, and not, like, you completely, it's fully transparent for you. This is one of the fascinating parts. So like this brings you this integrity, meaning like you can be sure that the thing has been done right even while no one was watching it. And it brings you scale, and it all feels like magic, and these are the three properties we talk about in the ZK Credo.
It's in one sense, since we even actually brought up the topic of zkML, I'm fundamentally curious, and even maybe taking a step back and really thinking about like zero knowledge proofs as a whole paradigm. Why do you feel they reflect to, I guess, the ethos that you wanted to kind of, that you were referring to at the start of the talk? So why is zero knowledge a very important or a crucial ingredient in the world that you want to see ahead?
Well, for blockchains.
We start with blockchains for sure, but in general, I'm curious to hear if you see like zero knowledge being
sure.
like
Okay, understood. So the problem blockchains solve is the problem of trust. Today trust requires institutions, or like in the world before blockchain, trust required institutions. You would transact using a bank. So you have to trust your bank, and you have to trust your bank that they keep the money for you in the right way, they don't spend your money, they don't disclose information about your transactions, and they do it all properly and with all counterparts, right? So you basically don't have any alternatives. You either trust them or you don't transact, because it's very impractical to go, do manual physical exchange of goods and services. And because they have this privileged position, which requires trust, they are acting as intermediaries who can impose a lot of like taxes and different requirements on you, and control you in certain ways, and get all your data. And this happens not with banks only. This happens throughout all the protocols on the internet. Like whatever you do, it requires some trust, and then like you trust Airbnb or Booking.com or Uber or whatever to connect you to the right people to verify their identities and so on. Blockchains solve this for the transfers of value, all things touching value. Zero knowledge proofs can solve this for all things that require computation and require trust and identity and the combination thereof. So it goes way beyond. You can trust a database to contain certain data that has been verified by, like, think of medical records, right? You can process certain results. You can collect data in different hospitals or different medical systems. You can then process them, come to an aggregate result, and then be sure that this result has been correctly computed without having access to all the original underlying data. This is massive. Because of this mistrust, data is not being shared properly between different parties. So like zero knowledge proofs have application like in a very broad range of domains, but we are specifically focused on blockchains because we're not thinking of like layer 2s as a separate like technology, or even blockchains as a separate technology. It's really just the continuation of the internet, the next layer of the internet.
Right. I think it's a great segue, I guess, to my next question, which was essentially around zkSync itself and how you're kind of thinking about getting developers to actually start interfacing with blockchains, with zero knowledge proofs, and what is, I guess, top of mind for you when you kind of think about zkSync and getting usage by developers and by users throughout.
So we see zkSync as an extension of Ethereum. zkSync is Ethereum, just scaled and adding privacy to it, but it's not a like entirely separate protocol or entirely separate thing. Yes, it has its own community and it has its own properties and it's slightly different, and we're working on making it more aligned in various ways, from the APIs to the way we interact with the underlying layer 1. But it's just like zkSync is what gives Ethereum the ability to become the fundament of this emerging world's Internet of Value.
Like what, maybe let's see if we can delve into like maybe some specific capabilities that zkSync can provide developers.
Oh, well, it will go very technical, so I don't know if the audience will appreciate, but like basically adding scale, not just scale. What we talk about in zkSync is we call it hyperscale. Just like internet can scale indefinitely without any bounds, you can add more and more servers and more connections, and you don't care. Like you have 1,000 users, 1 million users, 1 billion users. There are no inherent limits to how much it can grow. It's not the case with blockchains today. Bitcoin, Ethereum require that everyone verifies all the other transactions of everyone, which gives you a quadratic complexity of the computations. So like if your computations grow 1,000 times, or like if the number of transactions grows 1,000 times, the amount of work a single node has to do will grow 1 million times. And that will far exceed the requirements that we want a node to have. And we want the node to be like very lightweight, so everyone can run it, and it's like really broadly decentralized, and it's very important. So zero knowledge proofs, as zkSync specifically solve this. Like we can make Ethereum grow like infinitely large. So that's one property. Second property is obviously we can add privacy, which is not possible with anything like in classical, like without zero knowledge proofs, it's just not possible, period. Privacy is the second thing. And the third thing, which we focus on, which does not necessarily has to do something with zero knowledge proofs, is the user experience. Because if your user experience, like if it's complex to use, if it's hard, you don't understand concepts, you have to think of, oh, I need to have something called gas, and I need to pay in Ether for this transaction, and I need some secret key and write down some seed phrase and manage it securely. Most people will not get it. Like you want an experience which is like neo-banking. Just one click, like log in with your email, do one-click transaction, everything works, beautifully explained what you're signing. And it's possible, and you want still to have full self-custody. You don't want to use something like centralized exchanges that will hold funds on your behalf. You still need to be fully in control of that, because if you give away control, you will end up with a banking system 2.0, not with Web 3.0. So UX is specific. Like we have one thing called account abstraction, which is very specific to Ethereum. But like Ethereum layer 1 doesn't have it. We have it natively in the protocol, and this allows things like account recovery, smart wallets, where no seed phrases are needed, one-click transactions for like arbitrarily complex procedures, and so on. So these are the three focus areas of zkSync.
Glad to hear that. So maybe one comment that I might want to kind of reflect on is also just to understand, given the fact that zero knowledge proofs as such as a paradigm are so powerful in and of themselves, I'm just curious about how you kind of see the future playing as it relates to whether we would fundamentally replace all of our backends with systems that are entirely decentralized from the outset, or do you kind of see an intersectional world where we utilize verified compute and zero knowledge proofs to intersect with what systems we have today, but also get them to intersect with more decentralized systems?
I generally believe that we will see, like people were arguing that will internet take over all the paperwork and all the activities and all the communication, and a lot of people did not believe it like 20 years ago. You remember the Paul Krugman quotation that the internet will have no more impact on the world than a fax machine, right? And they turned out to be completely like outright wrong. And what I believe blockchains will do to the internet is the same kind of impact as what the internet has done to information. Basically, everything that touches value will go on-chain in one form or another. So there will be private chains, there will be local chains, there will be big public chains, there will be, it's going to be like this internet of chains seamlessly connected through using zero knowledge proofs, just like nothing else will work. Like we don't have any other technology today that can replace zero knowledge proofs. Like it must be at the core of all this connectivity. But you like everything. Think of like payments. All will be on chain. All of payments, like normal credit cards, like or credit cards will have to evolve and transform into blockchain payments. Because like why pay like 2% for a transaction if you can do it like seamlessly in like paying 0.1 cent? So the moment regulation catches up, and it's inevitable, it will catch up. Like there are efforts in the European Union, in Switzerland, in Singapore, in the US. I know for a fact that the US Congress is working on regulations, and there's going to be a package of legislation within the next 2 years. Like the chair of the financial committee of the US Congress is like heavily pro-crypto and a strong advocate, and he's pushing for this. Stable coins are going to be regulated. The moment stable coins are regulated, like everything, like all the payments can immediately go on chain, and it's massive if you think about the margin of the credit cards compared to the margin of the merchants that are selling goods. It's comparable. It's like 50% to 100% cut off, right? So like once that all goes on chain, interbank communication will go on chain because it's just a lot more efficient. And then things on top of that will emerge that we cannot imagine today, or like I mean, they are already being brewed in the blockchain community, but they're just isolated. They're not really like properly visible. But like like just like internet is not just putting newspaper on a PDF on the website. The blockchain value transactions is not going to be just moving payments and trading and property titles and like tickets and all the bonus points on chain. It's going to be a mesh with like new ways to interact with them that were not possible before. Like think of fractionizing a single invoice and spending like and sending 30% to like collateral contract that will give you the money back immediately, and then we'll deal with paying back. And like things like this will be possible with blockchain, and they are coming very soon. Like they require scale, privacy, better UX, and regulation, and all of that is coming very soon.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. And maybe just to close things out, how would you basically get people to actually start using these systems? What's your advice to get people on board?
I would just encourage you to explore Ethereum, explore things that like look at DeFi, look at NFTs, try it out, just get a sense of how it just play around. Like there are lots of tutorials. Just Google like Ethereum DeFi, get started, and you can play around. And of course, try it out zkSync because that's going to be the place where most of the activity will happen, which is my opinionated take.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. Really appreciate you taking this time to speak about a lot of things under the sun, but things that are obviously close to your heart and close to our hearts. So really appreciate it. Not sure if we have any questions from the audience.
Yep, we have a few up there. These have been the most upvoted so far.
Yeah, so like the first question is, do you care about preventing traceability on the blockchain? Does real anonymity exist in the world of crypto? Yes. Like look at protocols like Zcash or Aztec or even the infamous Tornado Cash. They are all using zero-knowledge proofs to achieve 100% anonymity and confidentiality for all transactions. Like you don't disclose anything about the transaction, not the recipient, not the sender, not the amount, not like any like all of that is hidden, but the integrity of the transaction is still enforced through zero-knowledge proofs. This is the magic of this technology. Next question: what role do you foresee for optimistic rollups then? I believe that optimistic rollups are a temporary technology that will not have a lot of usage in like within a year's time. That's my take as a technologist. Like everything the optimistic rollups can do, ZK rollups can do today, but much better, faster, with more security, specifically with lower trust assumptions that are important to reach the hyperscalability. Like optimistic rollups can give you a linear boost in scale, but they will not take you to hyperscalability, to building this internet of chains. This is why they will either have to adopt ZK or they will have to like fade away. How can ZK solve centralization? by leveraging this idea that you can verify all of the world's value transactions. Like imagine 100 million transactions happening on a lot of different chains, and then we compute proof of each transaction separately, and then proofs of each block on all of those chains, and then we compute the proof of the blocks, like we keep aggregating it in the tree, and then we get one single final proof that contains the proof of all these hundreds of millions of transactions. And then everyone can verify those transactions with their cell phone in just 30 milliseconds, like instantly. Like this gives you decentralization because now everyone can run a full node and not trust centralized servers, centralized entities to validate transactions for them.
Cool. I think we might.
Yeah, we can do one more.
One more?
Yeah.
Let's see which one is most interesting.
I guess we can maybe speak a little about MPC, I guess. Since
it's a little bit less of my domain. Let me pick a different question. So let's talk about AI maybe. The AI and crypto are complementary, and very importantly complementary. They're actually taking the world in two different opposing directions. And if you want to keep the world democratic, not totalitarian, not controlled by like a few individuals, like having all power, then you need to invest heavily in crypto and promote crypto and develop crypto, because the AI is taking you in the opposite direction. Like the AI, like there will be a lot of manipulation of public opinion to like slow down the AI development so that the governments and the military can accelerate it, you know, and like use all these frameworks, like keep it away from the public to these hidden agencies that will not stop. They will keep accelerating secretly because that's what they always do, and they will end like we will have a world where a few big, huge states control like everything that's happening. They will listen to you like in your kitchen, on your phone. Everything you say will be instantly translated into text, instantly analyzed by AI, and will be triggering like the surveillance. The degree of control the governments, the totalitarian states will be able to exert on people with AI is insane. Crypto is the way to oppose that, by taking power back to people from these powerful entities. So this is why we're in crypto. This is why we're so heavily pushing on the acceleration pedal with crypto to get there faster, to take control faster than the governments can, or these powerful forces. Not just governments, corporations, big entities, whatever. Like we need to give it back to people.
Crypto is the way for open source to be monetized, I guess, and we're seeing a lot of that in AI coming through. So that's awesome to hear. Right, amazing. This was really good. Thank you, Alex. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brendan, and thank you all, guys.
All right, big round of applause. Thank you, Alex.